I'm Emily, 28 years old, and I was raised in a family where money was never an issue. My parents built a tech empire, and we lived like royalty. When my father died, I expected the inheritance to be split between me and my sister Stephanie. Instead, she got $10 million, while I received just a letter saying, "Go earn your own." The shock and betrayal cut deep, but they had no idea what their rejection would unleash in me. If you're enjoying this story, let me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more life-changing stories like mine. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, I never questioned my place in the world. Our six-bedroom colonial house sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn, complete with a pool, tennis court, and guest house. My father, Richard, had built Next-Tech Solutions from a garage startup into a Fortune 500 company over 20 years. My mother, Diana, managed our social calendar and family image with precision and calculation. From my earliest memories, the dynamic between me and my sister Stephanie was complicated. 3 years younger than me, Stephanie seemed to naturally embody everything our parents valued. She was mathematically gifted, obedient, and showed interest in technology from a young age. I was more creative, independent, and questioned everything, traits my father considered weaknesses in the cutthroat business world he inhabited. "Emily asks too many questions," he would tell guests at dinner parties, with a laugh that carried an edge. "Stephanie just gets things done." The favoritism wasn't subtle. On my 12th birthday, I received a practical set of educational books. 2 months later, Stephanie turned 9 and got a custom-built treehouse complete with electricity and a computer. When I pointed out the disparity, my mother said, "Stephanie needs more encouragement to develop her potential." Despite this, I excelled academically. I graduated as valedictorian, earned perfect SAT scores, and received acceptance letters from 7 Ivy League schools. At the dinner celebrating these accomplishments, my father spent most of the evening discussing Stephanie's science fair project. My mother briefly acknowledged my achievements with, "Well, school has always come easily to Emily." Throughout high school, I developed a passion for both art and business. I created a small jewelry line that I sold to classmates and at local craft fairs. By senior year, I had saved almost $5,000 from my sales. When I shared my business model with my father, hoping finally to connect, he dismissed it as a cute hobby and suggested I focus on real career options. "Art won't pay the bills, Emily," he said, "unless you marry someone wealthy." Despite their pressure to follow Stephanie into computer science, I chose to attend Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. My parents considered this a compromise at best, a rebellion at worst. They paid my tuition but made it clear they found my choice disappointing. Meanwhile, they celebrated when Stephanie later chose MIT for computer engineering. "She's following in my footsteps," my father would tell anyone who would listen. College gave me distance and perspective. I thrived in the business program, specializing in marketing with a focus on sustainable brands, combining my business acumen with my values. I graduated with honors and landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm in New York. At my graduation dinner, my father's praise was tepid. "Let's see if you can translate academic success to the real world." Through it all, I maintained a protective relationship with Stephanie. Despite the unequal treatment, I never resented her personally. I understood she was as much a product of our parents' manipulation as I was. During her freshman year of high school, when a group of girls began bullying her about her intense focus on academics, I came home for a weekend specifically to help her navigate the situation. "You don't have to be what they want you to be," I told her during a rare moment alone. "You can choose your own path." She looked at me with confusion. "But I want to be like Dad." "Don't you?" That question revealed how deeply the family dynamics had shaped us both. While I was fighting for approval, Stephanie had internalized our parents' values so completely that she couldn't imagine questioning them. Our paths were diverging, not by choice but by design. As graduation approached, I already sensed that my accomplishments would never be enough. My parents had decided long ago which daughter would be their true successor. I was simply the practice round, the first pancake you throw away before making the perfect batch. What I didn't yet understand was how completely they would make this preference official. After college, I threw myself into building my career in New York City. My position at Marshall and Reed Marketing gave me the opportunity to work with innovative brands while earning enough to afford a small studio apartment in Brooklyn. The physical distance from Connecticut provided emotional breathing room, and I limited my family visits to major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. In those first few years, I called my mother weekly out of obligation. Our conversations followed a predictable pattern: brief questions about my work, which she never seemed to fully understand, followed by extensive updates about Stephanie's progress at MIT and internships at prestigious tech companies. Any achievements I mentioned were met with polite acknowledgement before the conversation shifted back to my sister. "Stephanie just got selected for a special innovation lab," my mother would gush. "Your father is so proud. When are you coming to visit next?" During my second year in New York, I met Trevor at a charity event for arts education. A financial analyst with a passion for photography, Trevor was everything my family was not: supportive, curious about my work, and genuinely impressed by my accomplishments. After 3 months of dating, when I finally opened up about my family dynamics, he was appalled. "They can't even see how amazing you are," he said, holding my hand across the restaurant table. "They're lost completely." The Christmas gathering when I was 24 marked a turning point. I brought Trevor home to meet my family, hoping his presence might help bridge the growing divide. Instead, my father spent the entire dinner grilling him about market projections and investment strategies, clearly trying to find flaws in his knowledge. "So you analyze markets but don't actually make big investment decisions," my father summarized dismissively. Interesting career choice. Later that evening, I overheard my mother telling Stephanie that she could do better than someone like Trevor. The comment stung not just as an insult to the man I loved, but as another indication that nothing connected to me would ever be good enough. That same visit, I noticed my father looking tired and drawn. When I asked my mother about his health, she was evasive. "Just working hard as always. Stephanie's been helping him streamline some company operations." It wasn't until 3 months later that I learned through a family friend that my father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. When I called home, shocked that no one had told me, my mother was defensive. "We didn't want to worry you when you're so busy with your little marketing job," she said. "Stephanie has been helping us manage everything." Despite the hurt of being excluded, I requested a temporary leave from work and returned home to help. The family home felt different: medical equipment in the den, a rotating schedule of nurses, and my father significantly thinner and more fragile than I had ever seen him. His reaction to my arrival was lukewarm at best. "You didn't need to interrupt your life," he said weakly. "Stephanie and your mother have everything under control." Still, I stayed. I coordinated with doctors, researched treatment options, and tried to make myself useful while navigating the cold emotional terrain. One evening, passing by my father's study, I overheard him speaking with his lawyer. "The distributions remain as we discussed," my father said. "Stephanie will manage the company interests appropriately. As for Emily..." There was a pause, and I held my breath in the hallway. "Emily has always insisted on her independence," he continued. "We'll respect that choice in the final arrangements." I backed away quietly, my mind racing. Was he planning to exclude me from the inheritance? Surely not completely. Despite our differences, I was still his daughter. I dismissed the thought as paranoia fueled by stress and exhaustion. Even with our complicated relationship, I couldn't imagine my father would disown me entirely. During that period at home, I also tried repeatedly to connect with Stephanie. We had once been close, despite our parents' differential treatment. Now, at 25, she seemed to view me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. "Dad always said you were too sensitive about everything," she told me during a rare moment alone. "If you had just followed the path he laid out, things would be different." "Different how?" I asked. She shrugged. "You'd be part of the family business. Part of the legacy." I wondered when pursuing my own dreams had become equivalent to rejecting my family. The realization was settling in that, in my parents' view, independence was tantamount to betrayal. As my father's condition deteriorated, so did any hope of reconciliation or understanding. We were speeding toward a conclusion I couldn't yet see, but increasingly feared. My father passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. The autumn leaves were at their peak color, vibrant reds and golds that seemed too lively for such a somber day. I was at the hospital, having taken the night shift watching over him, when he took his final breaths. My mother and Stephanie arrived 20 minutes too late, something my mother mentioned repeatedly during the funeral arrangements. "If only we'd been called sooner," she said, the implication hanging in the air that I had somehow failed in my duty. The funeral was an elaborate affair, befitting a business leader of my father's stature. Over 400 people attended the service at our family's church, followed by a private burial and reception at our home. I moved through these events in a fog of grief, not just for my father's death, but for the relationship we never had. Despite everything, I had loved him and had always held a flicker of hope that someday he would see me for who I was. Throughout the proceedings, I handled the guest book, arranged for catering, and made sure everything ran smoothly, while my mother and Stephanie received condolences. Several family friends expressed surprise at this division of labor. "You should be with your mother and sister," my father's college roommate told me kindly. "Let others handle the details." I simply smiled and continued my tasks. "This is where I'm needed," I said, knowing that standing beside my mother would only highlight the distance between us. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at our family attorney's office in downtown Hartford. Mr. Jacobson, who had handled our family's legal affairs for decades, greeted each of us solemnly as we entered the wood-paneled conference room. Present were my mother, Stephanie, myself, and two of my father's business partners who served as trustees for various assets. "Before we begin," Mr. Jacobson said, adjusting his reading glasses, "I want to express my deepest condolences to the family. Richard was not just a client but a friend." The preliminaries felt endless, legal terminology about probate, taxes, and trusts. I sat straight backed in my chair, hands folded in my lap, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Finally, Mr. Jacobson reached the core of the will. "To my beloved wife, Diana, I leave our vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons, along with an annual stipend of $2 million for life." My mother nodded, having clearly been prepared for these terms. "To my daughter Stephanie, the true inheritor of my business acumen and values, I leave $10 million in cash and securities, my controlling shares in NextX Solutions, and our family home in Greenwich, with the understanding that her mother may reside there as long as she wishes." Stephanie's eyes widened slightly. Perhaps even she hadn't expected such generosity. Mr. Jacobson continued, without pause. "To my daughter Emily." The room seemed to still. I held my breath. "I leave this letter with my hopes that its message will guide her future choices." Mr. Jacobson handed me a sealed envelope. The room was silent as I accepted it with trembling hands. "That's it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "That concludes the distribution of assets," Mr. Jacobson confirmed, avoiding my eyes. In that moment, the floor seemed to drop from beneath me. 28 years as Richard Preston's daughter, and my inheritance was a letter. I opened the envelope, aware of every eye in the room upon me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "Emily, you've always insisted on choosing your own path. Now you can do so without the crutch of family money. Go earn your own fortune. Perhaps then you'll understand the value of what you rejected." Dad, the words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not only had he disinherited me, but he had orchestrated this public humiliation as his final statement on my life choices. I looked up to see my mother's face set in an expression of grim satisfaction. Stephanie looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. "Was there nothing else?" I asked Mr. Jacobson. "No trust? No smaller inheritance?" "I'm sorry, Emily," he replied formally. "The will is quite clear." I don't remember leaving the office. The next clear memory I have is sitting on a bench in a nearby park, still clutching the letter, calling Trevor with hands so shaky I could barely hold the phone. They cut me out completely. I told him, my voice breaking. 10 million to Stephanie, and I got a lecture about earning my own money. Trevor was furious. That's unconscionable. We should contest it. There must be grounds, undue influence, something. But even in my devastation, I knew I wouldn't fight it. Contesting the will would mean prolonging my connection to a family system that had never valued me. It would mean giving them power over my emotional well-being for months or years of legal battles. No, I said finally. They can keep their money. I don't want anything from them anymore. The days that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I returned to New York and took a week off work, barely leaving my apartment. I questioned everything, my career choices, my values, even my perception of my childhood. Had I really been so difficult? Had I truly rejected family values, or had I simply tried to be authentic in a system that demanded conformity? Sleep became elusive. When I did manage to drift off, I had vivid dreams of standing in my father's office as a child, trying to show him a drawing I'd made, while he looked through me as if I were invisible. I'd wake up with tears on my face, the adult pain merging with childhood wounds. My work performance suffered. I missed deadlines, zoned out in meetings, and snapped at colleagues. My boss called me in for a conversation about my commitment level, unaware of the family trauma I was processing. 2 weeks after the will reading, when the initial shock had subsided into a dull, persistent ache, I finally sat down and read my father's letter again. Beyond the cruel instruction to earn my own fortune was a paragraph I had initially been too hurt to process. You've always been soft, Emily. Too concerned with feelings and creativity, and not enough with results. The real world doesn't reward sensitivity. I'm doing you a favor by forcing you to develop the hardness you'll need to truly succeed. Stephanie understands this. You never did. In those words, I finally saw clearly what I had been struggling against my entire life. My father had equated emotional intelligence with weakness. He had interpreted my empathy and creativity as character flaws rather than strengths. And in his final act, he had tried to force me to become someone else, someone like him. The realization didn't immediately heal the wound, but it gave me something I desperately needed: clarity. This wasn't about my worth. It was about his limitations. And while he might control his money from beyond the grave, he couldn't control who I chose to become. The weeks following the will reading stretched into months of emotional turmoil. I functioned on autopilot, going to work, coming home, barely eating, hardly sleeping. Trevor grew increasingly concerned as he watched me moving through life like a ghost. "This isn't sustainable, Emily," he said one evening in January, sitting beside me on my couch where I'd been staring blankly at a book for over an hour. "I think you need to talk to someone professional about this." His gentle persistence finally broke through my fog. The next day, I contacted a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Jessica Winters had an office in a brownstone near Central Park, with windows that let in streams of winter light. In our first session, I unloaded the entire story, my childhood, the will reading, my father's letter, in a torrent of words that left me exhausted. "What your family did was a form of emotional abuse," she said plainly after listening. "The favoritism, the conditional love, the public humiliation, these aren't normal family dynamics, even in wealthy families with high expectations." Over the next several sessions, Dr. Winters helped me identify patterns I'd never fully recognized. How my father had pit Stephanie and me against each other from childhood. How my mother had enabled and reinforced his behavior. How I had internalized the message that I was fundamentally flawed. "Your value is never dependent on their approval," Dr. Winters reminded me repeatedly. "The fact that you forged your own path despite their disapproval shows remarkable strength, not weakness." Slowly, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I started journaling, reconnected with friends I'd withdrawn from, and gradually improved my performance at work. Trevor remained steadfast, never pushing but always present. In March, at a marketing industry event I almost skipped, I ran into Margaret Wilson, who had been a friend of my parents and served on several charitable boards with my mother. I tensed when I saw her. expecting either pity or judgment about the inheritance situation, which had become gossip in their social circles. Instead, she greeted me warmly. Emily, I was hoping I'd run into you someday. Your campaign for the Sustainable Fashion Initiative was brilliant. That's exactly the fresh perspective the industry needs. We found a quiet corner to catch up, and to my surprise, Margaret showed genuine interest in my career. As our conversation progressed, I mentioned some ideas I'd been developing for marketing sustainable brands more effectively. You know, she said thoughtfully, you should consider starting your own agency. With your understanding of both business and sustainability, you could fill a real gap in the market. That would require capital I don't have, I said, thinking bitterly of the inheritance I'd been denied. Not necessarily, Margaret replied. My husband Jonathan works in venture capital, specifically with woman-led startups. Would you be interested in meeting him? That coincidental meeting set in motion a chain of events I couldn't have anticipated. Jonathan Wilson listened to my business concept over coffee the following week, a marketing agency exclusively focused on sustainable and ethical brands, using innovative approaches to help them compete with conventional products. It's a growing market segment, I explained, surprising myself with my passion as I outlined my vision. But most of these companies are spending their marketing dollars ineffectively. They're either preaching to the converted or failing to translate their value to mainstream consumers. Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. There's potential here. Would you be willing to develop a formal business plan? For the next 3 weeks, I worked evenings and weekends crafting a comprehensive business plan. The process rekindled something in me that had been dormant since before my father's death, a sense of purpose and possibility. When I presented the plan to Jonathan, he was impressed but cautious. The concept is solid, but I'll need to present this to my partners. In the meantime, you should meet with other potential investors. What followed was a discouraging series of rejections. Most investors thought the niche was too small or that I lacked the experience to lead a new agency. After my 8th rejection, I was beginning to question the entire endeavor when my phone rang with an unexpected caller. Stephanie. Emily, how are you? Her voice was tentative, almost apologetic. Our conversation was stilted at first. We exchanged pleasantries and carefully avoided mentioning our father or the inheritance. Finally, Stephanie came to the point. I heard through Margaret Wilson that you're starting a business. I want to help. I could invest some money, $500,000 maybe, as a gift, not a loan. The offer left me momentarily speechless. Was this guilt money? Pity? Or a genuine attempt to repair our relationship? Whatever the motivation, I knew accepting would create a power dynamic I wasn't comfortable with. Thank you for the offer, I said carefully. But this is something I need to build on my own terms. Is this because of the will? Stephanie asked, her voice tinged with frustration. I didn't ask Dad to do that, you know. I know, I replied. But you didn't object either. This isn't about punishing you, Stephanie. It's about me finally defining my own path without family complications. The conversation ended awkwardly, but it strengthened my resolve. The next day, I received a call from Jonathan Wilson. My partners are interested, he said. Not for the full amount you need, but we could provide seed funding of $200,000 for 20% equity. It was less than ideal, but enough to start. That evening, I told Trevor about the offer. I'm going to take it, I said. And I'm giving notice at my job tomorrow. Trevor took my hands in his. I believe in you completely, he said. Then, to my astonishment, he dropped to one knee. And I want to be by your side through all of it. Emily Preston, will you marry me? With tears in my eyes, joyful ones, for the first time in months, I said yes. As I embraced Trevor, I realized I was finally breaking free from the shadow of my father's judgment and building a life truly my own. With Jonathan Wilson's investment secured, I resigned from Marshall and Reed and threw myself entirely into creating Preston's sustainable marketing. My first office was a tiny corner of a co-working space in Brooklyn, just a desk, a chair, and a dream that felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. The early days were a crash course in entrepreneurship. I handled everything: client outreach, proposal writing, campaign creation, billing, and administrative tasks. My first hire was Zoe, a brilliant graphic designer I'd worked with previously who shared my vision for sustainability. Together, we pitched our services to small eco-friendly brands that larger agencies overlooked. Our first client was Terra Threads, a sustainable clothing company struggling to expand beyond their loyal but limited customer base. Working with their modest budget, we created a campaign that highlighted the human stories behind their ethical manufacturing process. The results exceeded everyone's expectations: a 40% increase in sales within 3 months and features in several fashion publications. "You made our products relatable without compromising our values," Terra's founder told me. "That's something no other marketing firm has managed to do." This success led to referrals, and slowly our client list grew. I reinvested every profit into the business, taking only a minimal salary for myself. Trevor's income supported our basic living expenses, allowing me this freedom. By the 6-month mark, we had 5 clients and needed to expand. I hired Aiden, a social media strategist with experience in the sustainability sector, and Rachel, an account manager who had previously worked with major cosmetics brands but wanted to align her career with her environmental values. Our tiny team worked long hours, fueled by conviction and the satisfaction of seeing tangible results. The workload was grueling. I regularly pulled 80-hour weeks, starting early and ending late. My typical day began at 5:30 with emails, included back-to-back client meetings and strategy sessions, and ended with proposal writing that often stretched past midnight. Even with 3 employees, the demands outpaced our capacity. The stress manifested physically. I developed insomnia, grinding my teeth so severely at night that I cracked a molar. Anxiety attacks became frequent, often striking before important client presentations. During one pitch meeting, my hands shook so badly I could barely turn the pages of our proposal. Dr. Winters helped me recognize that I was subconsciously trying to prove my father wrong by working myself to exhaustion. "Success built on self-destruction isn't true success," she cautioned. "And it certainly won't bring you happiness." Her words forced me to confront a difficult truth. I was running my business the way my father would have, prioritizing results over well-being, both mine and my team's. The realization was a turning point. I began implementing changes, setting boundaries around work hours, delegating more effectively, and trusting my team with greater responsibility. "You hired us because we're good at what we do," Zoe pointed out during a frank conversation about my micromanagement. "Let us show you just how good we are." Loosening control was difficult, but transformative. As I stepped back from handling every detail, my team flourished, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative approaches I hadn't considered. Our campaigns became more creative and effective as a result. By our first anniversary, Preston's sustainable marketing had grown to 10 employees and moved to a proper office space in Manhattan. Our client roster included 15 sustainable brands across fashion, beauty, food, and household products. We developed a reputation for helping ethical companies break into mainstream markets without compromising their values. The pivotal moment came when Evergreen Living, a national eco-friendly home products line, approached us after seeing our work for a smaller competitor. Their marketing director was blunt during our initial meeting. "We've worked with 3 major agencies, and none of them get our ethos," she explained. "They either want to greenwash our message until it's meaningless or go so deep into environmental jargon that we lose the average consumer." We won the account with a strategy that balanced authenticity with accessibility. The resulting campaign increased Evergreen's market share by 22% and earned us an Industry Innovation Award, bringing significant attention to our small agency. Following the award announcement, I noticed increased activity on our company's social media accounts from unexpected sources. My mother and Stephanie had begun following our progress. My mother even left a comment on a LinkedIn post about our Evergreen campaign, proud to see a family connection to such important work. The comment made my stomach clench. After nearly 2 years of silence, they were suddenly interested in my success. I didn't respond. A week later, Stephanie called. "Mom and I would love to take you to lunch," she said. to catch up and hear about your company. The award is really impressive. I'm quite busy, I replied, more coldly than I intended. Emily, please. We're family, despite everything. I agreed reluctantly, more out of curiosity than desire for reconciliation. The scheduled lunch coincided with another significant development, a valuation of Preston's sustainable marketing at just over $1 million based on our client list, growth trajectory, and unique positioning in the market. As the business flourished, Trevor and I began planning our wedding, a small, intimate ceremony that reflected our values. We chose a sustainable venue, locally sourced catering, and asked guests to donate to environmental causes in lieu of gifts. The planning brought joy during an intensely busy period. In June, Marketing Forward magazine featured me in their Rising Entrepreneurs to Watch list, with a profile highlighting our agency's rapid growth and innovative approach. The article mentioned my background but tactfully avoided the inheritance drama, focusing instead on how Preston's sustainable marketing was changing the conversation around sustainable brands. Emily Preston has identified a crucial gap in the market, the article stated. By translating sustainability from a niche concern to a mainstream value proposition, she's helping ethical companies compete on a larger stage. The morning the article was published, I received an email from my mother for the first time in 2 years. The subject line read simply, "Your father would be proud." I closed the email without reading further. Whatever validation I had once craved from my parents, I no longer needed. I had built something meaningful on my own terms, defined success by my own metrics, and found happiness that wasn't contingent on their approval. As I prepared for both the awkward family lunch and my company's continued expansion, I reflected on how far I'd come from that devastating day at the will reading. My father had told me to earn my own fortune, never imagining I would create one built on values he had dismissed as impractical. The irony wasn't lost on me. Preston's sustainable marketing continued its impressive trajectory through our second year. We expanded to 20 employees, moved to a larger office space in a LEED-certified building, and developed a client waiting list for the first time. Our campaigns were winning industry recognition, and our approach was being discussed in marketing classrooms as a case study in effective mission-driven branding. The growth brought new challenges. Several larger agencies attempted to poach our top talent with significant salary increases. Competitors began mimicking our strategies for their own sustainability-focused clients. And as our profile rose, so did scrutiny of our work and company culture. I navigated these challenges by doubling down on our core values: transparency with clients, supportive team environment, and measurable impact for sustainable brands. We implemented profit sharing for employees and turned down clients whose commitment to sustainability seemed superficial or solely for marketing purposes. In August, I received an unexpected email from Carson Reynolds, CEO of Meridian Marketing Group, a major agency with global reach. The message was direct. Interested in discussing potential acquisition of Preston's sustainable marketing. Available to meet next week. My initial reaction was dismissal. I hadn't built this company to sell it, especially not to a conventional agency that might dilute our mission. But Trevor encouraged me to at least take the meeting. Hearing them out doesn't commit you to anything, he reasoned. And understanding the market value of what you've built is useful information, regardless of your decision. The meeting with Carson and his executive team took place in their sleek Midtown offices. They presented their case professionally. Meridian wanted to expand into the sustainability sector, and acquiring Preston would give them immediate credibility and expertise. Their initial offer was $8 million, with a 2-year contract for me to remain as division head. "We value what you've created," Carson explained. "We don't want to change your approach. We want to scale it." I thanked them for their interest but made no commitments, promising to consider the offer carefully. The number was staggering, far more than I had anticipated. Still, I had reservations about how our company culture and mission would fare within a corporate giant. As I was processing this possibility, the scheduled lunch with my mother and Stephanie arrived. We met at an upscale restaurant near Central Park, the kind my mother had always preferred: exclusive, expensive, and traditional. They were already seated when I arrived, both immaculately dressed and looking oddly nervous. "Emily, darling," my mother said, rising to air-kiss my cheek. "You look wonderful. Success agrees with you." Stephanie offered a more genuine hug. "It's really good to see you, Em." The initial conversation was stilted, careful questions about my company, Trevor, and our wedding plans. They both seemed determined to keep things pleasant, avoiding any mention of my father or the inheritance. I answered politely but briefly, wondering what had prompted this sudden desire to reconnect. Finally, over dessert, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a folded newspaper article, the marketing forward profile of me. "We've been following your progress," she said. "Your company is making quite a name for itself." "Yes, it is," I acknowledged. "Your father always said you had a good business mind, if you would apply it properly," she continued, rewriting history with breathtaking ease. I set down my fork. "That's not what he said, and we both know it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Stephanie looked between us anxiously. "Perhaps he didn't express it well," my mother conceded. "But he would be impressed with what you've accomplished." "I didn't build my company to impress him," I said evenly. "Or you." My mother's smile tightened. "Of course not, dear. But now that you've proven yourself, I think it's time we discussed reuniting the family. After all, Preston Resources should support Preston endeavors." And there it was, the real purpose of a lunch. Now that I had created something valuable, they wanted to be associated with it. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. "Well, your sister and I have been talking." My mother glanced at Stephanie, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "We think it would make sense for Stephanie to invest some of her inheritance in your company. A family partnership of sorts." Stephanie finally spoke up. "I really do believe in what you're doing, Emily, and it would be a way to make things more fair." I studied my sister's face and saw genuine regret there. But my mother's expression revealed different motivations, calculation, opportunity, and the same conditional acceptance she had always offered. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "But Preston Sustainable Marketing is doing quite well without family investment. In fact, I'm currently considering an acquisition offer for $8 million. My mother's eyebrows shot up. $8 million? Well, that's impressive. Though I'm sure with family backing, you could grow it to much more. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But there's something you both need to understand. What happened at the will reading, it hurt deeply, but it also freed me. For the first time, I built something without worrying about family approval. And I discovered I'm actually better without that particular burden." "That's rather harsh, Emily," my mother said stiffly. "It's honest," I corrected her. "Dad's final message to me was to earn my own. I've done that, but not in the way he intended. I've built a company based on values he dismissed and created success on my terms. The irony is that his rejection was the push I needed to fully step into my own power." Stephanie's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted things to be this way between us." "I know," I said more gently. "And I'm open to rebuilding our relationship as sisters, but not as business partners. Some boundaries need to remain." The remainder of lunch was tense but civil. As we were leaving, my mother made one last attempt. "Will you at least consider our offer? Families should stick together." "Families should support each other," I corrected. "And that support should be unconditional, not tied to financial gain." Over the next 2 weeks, I negotiated with Meridian, eventually securing a deal valued at $15 million, with guarantees about preserving our team, methodology, and client relationships. The contract included provisions ensuring our sustainability standards wouldn't be compromised and allocated funding for an internal incubator for new environmental marketing approaches. The day we announced the acquisition to our team, assuring them their jobs were secure and their work would continue with greater resources, was one of the proudest of my life. The celebration party that evening was bittersweet, marking both an end and a beginning. Midway through the party, the receptionist approached me nervously. "Miss Preston, your mother and sister are downstairs. They're asking to join the celebration." I was momentarily stunned by their audacity. They had ignored my success until it became financially significant, rejected my boundaries at lunch, and now wanted to join a celebration they had no part in creating. Please let them know this is a private event for the team and our investors, I replied firmly. Later that evening, after returning home from the party, I received a tearful call from Stephanie. I understand why you didn't want us there, she said, her voice breaking. But I need you to know something. I've been living in Dad's shadow, trying to be what he wanted. Watching you break free and succeed on your own terms, it's made me question everything. I'm not happy, Emily. I have the money, but I don't have what you have. Her vulnerability surprised me. For the first time, I saw that the inheritance had trapped Stephanie in patterns our father had established, while my disinheritance had ultimately liberated me. It's not too late to find your own path, I told her softly. Would you help me? She asked hesitantly. Not with money, but with figuring out who I am outside of Dad's expectations. The question hung in the air, representing a potential new chapter in our relationship, one based on authentic connection rather than competition or financial entanglement. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Yes, I said finally. I would like that. The years following the acquisition brought significant changes to both my professional and personal life. The $15 million payment transformed my financial reality overnight, but I was determined to use it in ways aligned with my values rather than simply accumulating wealth as my father had done. After fulfilling my 2-year contract with Meridian, where I successfully integrated our team while maintaining our core approach, I faced the question of what to do next. I was 33, financially secure, and eager for a new challenge that would create meaningful impact. The answer came from an unexpected source, a conversation with one of our clients who ran a fair trade coffee company. He described the obstacles he'd faced as a first-generation entrepreneur without family connections or access to capital. The sustainable business space is still primarily accessible to the privileged, he noted. People with financial safety nets who can afford to take risks. His observation resonated deeply with me. Despite being disinherited, I had still benefited from an excellent education, professional network, and the cultural capital that came with my upbringing. Many aspiring entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas never got the chance to realize them due to systemic barriers. This realization led me to establish the Preston Foundation for Entrepreneurial Equity, dedicating $5 million to providing seed funding, mentorship, and resources to underrepresented entrepreneurs focused on sustainability. The foundation specifically sought out individuals from backgrounds typically overlooked by traditional venture capital, women, people of color, and those from economically disadvantaged communities. Success shouldn't depend on having the right family or connections, I explained at the foundation's launch event. Great ideas can come from anywhere, and we're committed to removing barriers that prevent them from reaching the market. Alongside this work, Trevor and I embraced another major life change: parenthood. Our daughter Lily was born in spring, bringing a joy I hadn't known was possible. Holding her in my arms, I made a silent promise that she would always know her worth wasn't tied to achievement or compliance. You are loved exactly as you are, I whispered to her sleeping form. That will never change. Parenthood prompted deep reflection on my own upbringing and the patterns I wanted to break. Trevor and I developed parenting principles focused on emotional support, celebrating Lily's unique qualities, and teaching her that mistakes were opportunities for growth rather than failures to be ashamed of. As my foundation work expanded and Lily grew into a curious, confident toddler, my relationship with my mother and Stephanie evolved in unexpected ways. My mother maintained a certain distance, occasionally sending gifts for Lily and making carefully worded overtures that never quite acknowledged the past. I accepted these gestures with polite gratitude, but maintained firm boundaries. With Stephanie, however, a genuine healing process began. Following her vulnerable phone call after the acquisition announcement, we started meeting monthly, first for coffee, then for longer conversations about our shared history and separate futures. She gradually disentangled herself from our father's expectations, selling her shares in Nextech and using a portion of her inheritance to start a nonprofit focused on increasing access to technology education for underserved communities. "I'm finally doing something that feels like me, not like Dad," she told me during a walk through Central Park, where we'd taken Lily to play. "I think I needed to see you forge your own path before I could find the courage to do the same." 2 years after establishing my foundation, I received unexpected news. Stephanie had lost a significant portion of her inheritance through a combination of poor investments and a trusted financial advisor who had mismanaged her funds. The family home had to be sold, and my mother was forced to downsize to a smaller residence. When Stephanie called to tell me, I expected a request for financial help. Instead, she simply wanted me to know what was happening. "I'm not calling for money," she clarified immediately. "I still have enough to live comfortably, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not through gossip." "How are you feeling about it?" I asked. "Strangely liberated," she admitted. "The money always felt like Dad's approval made tangible. Losing some of it has forced me to define my worth differently." I recognized in her words my own journey, the painful but ultimately freeing process of building an identity separate from our father's judgment and resources. Though our paths had been different, we had arrived at similar insights. During this period, my mother reached out with greater frequency, her tone shifting from condescension to something approaching respect. At Lily's third birthday party, which my mother and Stephanie attended at my invitation, she pulled me aside for a rare moment of candor. "Your father and I were wrong about you," she said quietly, watching Lily laughing with Trevor. "You've created something meaningful, not just successful." I don't think Richard ever understood the difference. The acknowledgement, late as it was, represented a shift in our relationship. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a mutual recognition of truth that allowed for a carefully bounded relationship moving forward. As I approached my 35th birthday, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from that devastating while reading to the life I'd created. The cruel message to go earn my own had indeed forced me onto a path of independence, but the results had been profoundly different from what my father intended. Instead of hardening me, the experience had deepened my empathy. Instead of making me value wealth above all, it had clarified what truly mattered: authenticity, meaningful work, loving relationships, and the freedom to define success on my own terms. In a moment of poetic justice, Forbes magazine ran a feature on the Preston Foundation, highlighting our impact on sustainable entrepreneurship. The article mentioned my father only in passing, focusing instead on how the foundation was reshaping access to opportunity in the green economy. My mother sent me the clipping with a note that simply read, "You've created your own legacy." The greatest lesson from my journey wasn't about money or success, but about the liberation that comes from releasing the need for external validation. By letting go of my father's approval, or rather, by having it forcibly taken from me, I discovered a resilience and creativity I might never have found otherwise. As I watch Lily growing, already showing signs of her own independent spirit, I'm grateful for the chance to parent differently, to offer the unconditional love and support I never received. The inheritance I'm most concerned with passing to her isn't financial but emotional, the knowledge that her worth is intrinsic, not earned, and that authenticity is more valuable than conformity. If you've related to any part of my story, the struggle for approval, the pain of rejection, or the journey to define success on your own terms, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to forge your own path when others didn't believe in you? How did it shape who you became? Share your experience and subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected resilience. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest disappointments. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth was never dependent on anyone else's recognition of it.